What are bands and chains for?
So bands and chains change the force velocity curve. So if you were to look at your highest amount of force is your slowest point, right? So if think of it like, let's start at the bottom. Can you pull up a force velocity curve on the page for me, please? So I'm going to talk you guys through this curve, and I think it might make sense of why you might need bands and chains. Now, obviously, there's a lot more physics involved, and I'm talking about it at a very elementary level so that everybody can just go, that makes sense. I'm not trying to go way crazy into it and act like a smartass. So let's go in here. Okay, so you see as force rises, the speed slows. So at the top, at maximal strength, that would be like the heaviest fucking deadlift you could possibly pick would be the top of that right line closest to the force point, okay? It's going to just be like, how long does a max effort deadlift take? 5 seconds?
Yeah.
It's a long time. It's almost isometric. Okay, so we understand what that is. But down at the bottom where it says speed, think of that like throwing a fucking baseball, right? It's heavier enough to where you can really put some juice into it, but you can't put a lot of force into it because it's too light. Now, if we move up to speed strength, we're talking something like a plyometric, like a depth jump or something like that. We go into power, we're probably talking 30 to 40% range where I train speed work. You're talking strength speed, you're somewhere around 60, 70% closer to where Louis talked about speed work. So as you can see, that curve, when you use bands and chains, you actually move the red line up a little bit, creating more force at a higher velocity because you're having to push on something that's getting heavier. I look at it this way, and it seems to make really good sense to me because I'm a car guy. But let's say you get in your car and you're driving 65 down the highway. Well, let's say 80 now. But let's just say you're going 65 and you got it on cruise control. And that cruise control will not stop. You know, like when you touch the brake, it shuts off. Let's say it doesn't. And you start applying the brake very slowly. How hard does that engine have to work to maintain 65 miles an hour with brake friction? A fucking ton. So why wouldn't that be the same thing for muscle action? See what I'm saying? So if I'm pushing against bands and chains, heavier, and now I'm trying to put maximum force into it, I have to work harder to maintain bar speed. Yeah. The same way an engine would have to work harder as you apply brakes. So by adding bands and chains with the proper amount of weight on the bar and the proper amount of band tension, you're going to manipulate that force velocity curve. Does that make sense? So imagine you throw a baseball and you can throw it, say, 100 feet. Now attach a micro mini band to it. See, really when you throw a baseball, you're only throwing it for the first 16 inches. And then you've already created enough whip on it, you're just following through. If you had a band attached to it, you ain't following through shit. It's going to have to go all the way through your hand. And that's what bands and chains are for. It's manipulating that force velocity curve.
Also potentially assisting with less deceleration, because sometimes if the weight's too light that you're using for speed and it doesn't have a band or chain on there, you can kind of like, I guess, like over press into it, and your body's smart enough to not hurt itself. Yep. Just like throwing a wiffle ball, like it's not an appropriate weight to put a ton of force into.
To stop, you have to slow down. But with bands and chains, the amount of slowing down is much less.
And a lot of the time, you might not be building as much fatigue as if you were just working with an 80, 90% load straight up.
Here's why free weights, and again, we're going theoretical here. Here's why free weights don't work all the time. Free weights don't work all the time because they have the same force velocity curve. Where do you notice, and Mark, you've had a gym for a long time. I've had a gym for a long time. You've been around a gym a long time. I know you've been around. Where do people miss a fucking bench or a squat? Either right off the floor or halfway up.
Yeah.
But we're talking the halfway up guys right now, which I would say is 80, 90% of everybody. So the bench on the chest and it can't get it. Why? You have all the work down here with free weights and none of the work at the top. Because once you beat the weight, you've already got inertia on it, and now 225 doesn't weigh 225. But on your chest, when you have to go the opposite direction, you might have to put 250 pounds of pressure to get 225 to move the other way. So now you're building all this strength in the bottom, but hardly anything at the top. So then when you go to strain and that bar speed's not there, you miss in the middle because you didn't strain in the middle because free weight's only hard at the bottom. It's like camming. It's like a cam. You know, like when your machine's out there, you can change where the weight gets hard and easy or not at all. Yeah. Bands and chains change that too. So now you have to, once it hits here, you're used to it getting heavier and you just boom. Make sense?
Yes.
So the reason it got a bad rap was because bench shirts and squat suits got you out of the bottom. So the bands and chains were the hardest at the top. But if you look at muscle physiology, it's the same thing. You want to create a lot of kinetic energy. You want to get the bar moving really fast. Look at Maddox's bench, how fast it is off his chest. Where the fuck does he miss it? At the top, what does he not train with very often? Bands or chains. So if he was theoretically utilizing if you could pull up Maddox's missing a bench, You're going to see he misses it at the top every time. Why? He trains with free weights all the time. So his starting strength is crazy, but he doesn't keep the inertia going because the weights got lighter in training. Therefore, the work's not as high at the top. Make sense?
It does. Makes tons of sense. Do you think that some of that training has also led to you having longevity because
absolutely
the weights are lighter at the bottom and heavier at the top?
He misses right. That's a good one.
I think that was.
Almost took his teeth out. But I'm looking for one he actually misses before he gets to the top.
It shows the 800 that he misses at the end.
It's a fucking animal.
Yeah, he's an animal. So see how much it slows down there?
Yeah.
If he was training with bands and chains,
Might be able to plow right through that
he'd plow
spot.
right through it. So
722.
So these are all good ones.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see. I want to see his fails. But yeah, you watch when he fails, and you can see that he's used to training with it off his. The weight's going to be the heaviest at the point they tell him to press. So right now it's 800.
Oh, maybe not. God damn.
I remember that. I was there at that meet, I think.
Getting some weird liftoffs, man.
You know, that's the biggest problem with him. I try to talk to him all the time. I was like, you need to have the same liftoff guy every fucking time.
Yeah.
He goes to these different gyms and doesn't have the same liftoff guy. And with those kind of weights, there's no messing around.
I remember Mendelsohn years ago.
So we watch where he misses. See that top point?
Yeah.
So the thing of it is, he's used to driving it off of his chest. He's strong there. So let's say 800 pounds takes 850 to move. So again, if you do 800 to 800, what happens to the bar? Nothing, right? You have to push over that. So he does have that starting power, but not the finish power.
Power Project family, how's it going? Now, on this podcast, we talk all about recovery, which is why 8 Sleep are the beds that we sleep on. Now, 8 Sleep is the Tesla of beds. Not only does it track your heart rate, your HRV, your tosses and turns, it also tracks how long you've been in each sleep cycle, and the mattress does something amazing. It changes its temperature through the night to make sure that in each sleep cycle, you're getting the optimum sleep for you. Now, I know you guys are interested in checking them out, so head to 8sleep.com/powerproject, and you'll automatically be able to save $150 off of your Pod Pro cover or your Pod Pro cover and mattress combo. Check them out. Enjoy the video.
So that's just like an example of what bands and chains would do, but the average person is going to stick way lower than that on the bench. And it's because if you look at free weights, they have limitations with inertia and kinetic energy. You get to the bottom and this is the hardest point. Now it's already moving, so you just glide through.
Yeah.
Bands and chains will not let you do that.
There's also a huge advantage when it comes to just sometimes doing stuff in a more advantageous position. Something like a skull crusher. You can do that with some chains on a bar, and now the weight is totally deloaded at the bottom, where most of the time that might bother someone's elbow.
Or be the highest point of injury.
Right.
Everything's stretched the worst.
Right.
So that's the lightest point. Here's where you start to see why bands and chains have really been in papers as not really working. They don't have the right percentages of weight to band ratio because they're not lifters. They don't understand it. They don't feel it. And they're not using athletes that are strong enough to see it. You know? So that's why you're having an issue. I know Greg Knuckles talked on Dave Tate's thing about bands and chains don't work.
Yeah.
Well, that's why. They do work. They just haven't been put in the right position yet with the right professor, with the right fucking research.
How about, so I mean, I know there's a big difference between these two, but how about the individuals who try to employ a pause or a double pause to try to get that ton of benefit? So for example, on a bench, come down, press a few inches above, pause, and then drive through it.
We call that a ratchet.
Okay.
So a ratchet, like when you click, 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 click. So we'll do a lot of ratcheting on the eccentric. So what you would do is on a speed bench, 1, 2, 3, bang. I'm a huge proponent of not fucking with the concentric.
Okay.
Oh, concentric is always bow.
All right.
Whatever you do. But on the eccentric, if you want to develop particular points of strain, I think you can change not only the tempo, but you can also ratchet down. But if you look, really the power, if you do a lot of research and reading, the power of getting stronger sometimes lies in the eccentric of the movement, not the concentric. So if you manipulate the eccentric loading, timing, and positioning constantly, you're going to get more benefit out of the same exercise, but never teach your body to have a sticking point on its own.
Got it.
You teach, if you want that same amount of pressure, add another fucking chain. Because now it's going to force you to punch through, but don't teach it to stop. You can do anything you want on the way down, but do not fuck with that concentric.
Hey, I know you guys enjoyed the video, so like, comment, subscribe, and head to the Power Project Discord below. Talk to y'all later.